So one of the trends, which is not necessarily new, but I think it's continuing and perhaps even further increasing, is the politicization of humanitarian response, in the sense of the further integration of humanitarian action into foreign policy. So I'm particularly speaking here from the perspective of government, who want to use or see humanitarian action as part of their foreign policy. I mean, and you see it in a number of governments. So, you know, it's aid being used as an integral part of foreign policy. And I think this is also exactly happening with humanitarian response, which I think is very problematic, of course, because of humanitarian principles and so on. And it creates a further challenge for humanitarian organizations in terms of their independence. A trend, again, which related to this, I think, is very much the pressure on humanitarian organizations to demonstrate results. The results-based management, value for money. I mean, there are all these sort of terms out there. Organizations need to demonstrate that, in fact, what they do has a measurable impact on the ground. Now, of course, I mean, you know, it is about producing results. But the question then exactly is, how do you define those results? And within humanitarian context, that's, you know, some of those results are longer term. You know, we're talking about very volatile environments which change day to day. So it's not necessarily that you know, can measure everything in quantitative terms. I think that is problematic. Because, as I said, not everything is necessarily measurable. Some of the decisions that humanitarian organizations have to take on a daily basis are very difficult, complicated decisions in terms of competing demands and so on. And sometimes we cannot even work at all because of lack of security or lack of access. So, you know, pushing back, I think, on this sort of results-based value for money discourse, I think, is really, again, very important. A challenge is to ensure that quality accountability as such does not become further an end in itself, in the sense of what I see has happened in the last 5-7 years. If I also look at coordination, it's become an industry, for instance. And there's almost a risk that the same is happening in that sense with quality and accountability. I mean, I always have looked at it in terms of a means to an end, in terms of delivering better aid. I mean, projects such as particularly Sphere and a number of the related projects, they're a means to an end to help humanitarian practitioners do their work better, to deliver higher quality and so on, and to be more accountable. But that, you know, there's the risk that it goes off too much and it becomes too much standardized and too much a bureaucratic exercise, a tick off the box. We have dealt with it, you know, let's move on. Is there an opportunity in there? Probably, in the sense of, I think, precisely the exercise that is going on now with the common humanitarian standard, with the discussion on the future of Sphere, is maybe to go back a little bit to the original philosophy, which is very much, I think, trying to capture that humanitarian activism, the humanitarian philosophy, the humanitarian principles and so on, you know, and to say, actually, these are our guiding principles. This is really what is driving us, you know, so we need to keep these really on the forefront of our mind. And all the rest, in terms of technical standards and so on, it's an elaboration of that. It's important in terms of what we do technically and that it's, you know, of good quality and so on. But at the same time, what comes first are the humanitarian principles. So that's what we need to put up front. There's a lot of conversation at the moment, of course, and for the right reasons, one would say, on strengthening local capacity and so on. And, you know, more NGOs becoming active in humanitarian response that are from affected countries. So I imagine that their role will further increase and become more important. At the same time, I believe that those organizations are, or can be at least, in very vulnerable spots. The support in that sense from the international community and international humanitarian organizations to local capacity, I think, is really important. So thinking about what the community will look like, I think the role of local organizations will have increased further. But I think, and in that sense, what I think is important is that the larger international organizations really think about, what is their role in terms of supporting local capacity, and particularly when one talks about, situations of armed conflict, how do we make sure that local and international organizations are in fact, that outside witness and give them that protection that they need. Sphere for me is sort of, remains, the most important handbook in terms of actually, a one-stop place which captures really the humanitarian philosophy, and it has already been that for the last more than 10 years now, and I think it will continue to do that, particularly also for those local organizations, many of them still learning how to do, so to speak, humanitarian response, will continue to be as important now, will continue to be important in 10 years as it is now. So I really see Sphere in that sense, as the institutional knowledge and the institutional, the tool that really captures the humanitarian philosophy as having a central place in that sense within the humanitarian community.